Imagine that you're walking through a store when a man passes by and something about his cologne stops you cold. You're not sure why, but your chest tightens, your stomach knots, your breath catches. Suddenly, you're not in that store anymore. You're 9 years old now, in a room you haven't thought about in years, frozen. This is not imagination, it's not overreaction. It's your body remembering what your mind may have tried to forget. Have you ever reacted in a way that even you couldn't explain? A sound, a smell, a glance, a place, and suddenly you're anxious, dissociating, or overwhelmed? This is the hidden nature of trauma. Trauma doesn't live only in the mind, it's stored quite literally in the body, in your muscles, your breath, your posture, your nervous system. It is encoded in the way you flinch, the way you hold your shoulders, the way your body prepares to protect you even when no threat is present. Today we begin to unpack one of the most important truths in trauma science. The body remembers everything. Trauma is often misunderstood. To many, it's defined narrowly as a violent event, a catastrophic accident, or a battlefield experience. But trauma is not the event itself. Trauma is what happens inside us as a result of an event we were unprepared for, overwhelmed by, or unable to fully process. In clinical terms, trauma is a disruption in the body's ability to maintain internal safety. It's the imprint of unbearable stress on the body and brain. Two people can experience the same event. One may recover relatively quickly, while the other may experience flashbacks, panic, or dissociation for years. The difference lies not in the severity of the event alone, but in the nervous system's capacity to regulate and restore safety after the fact. Trauma can be acute, resulting from a single incident such as an assault or car crash, but it can also be chronic, such as prolonged exposure to emotional neglect, domestic violence, systemic oppression, or childhood unpredictability. In both cases, the body adapts in order to survive. Over time, those adaptations can become deeply ingrained patterns, not just mentally, but physically. Importantly, trauma is not a personal failure. It's not a sign of weakness or fragility. It's the body doing what it's designed to do, protect you in the face of threat. See, when people say, just get over it, they misunderstand that trauma isn't a choice. It's a physiological state. Trauma, then, is not just a wound to the mind. It's a wound to the entire nervous system, a disruption of safety at the most fundamental level. And this wound is carried in the body long after the event is over. Trauma doesn't just reside in memories or flashbacks. It imprints itself in the body, embedding patterns of tension, dysregulation, and reactivity. To understand this, we need to explore how the body processes, stores, and responds to trauma on multiple physiological levels. At the core of trauma's imprint is the autonomic nervous system, the part of our physiology responsible for automatic processes like heart rate, respiration, and digestion. It governs our survival responses through two primary branches: the sympathetic nervous system, associated with fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system, associated with rest and digest. When a person experiences a traumatic event, the nervous system shifts into survival mode. The sympathetic branch activates, releasing stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, speeding up the heart and preparing the body for action or escape. If escape is not possible, such as in childhood trauma or sexual assault, the body may enter the freeze response, shutting down non-essential functions in a bid to survive. Now, over time, repeated exposure to trauma can rewire the nervous system, trapping it in a state of chronic hyperarousal, anxiety, irritability, insomnia, or hypoarousal, numbness, fatigue, emotional disconnection. These are not psychological moods. They are physiological states maintained by a dysregulated nervous system. One of the key structures involved here is the vagus nerve, a major pathway of communication between the brain and body. When trauma disrupts vagal tone, the person's ability to regulate emotions, feel safe in their body, or respond flexibly to stress becomes compromised. Trauma also leaves its mark on the muscular system. When faced with threat, muscles contract to shield vital organs or prepare for impact. In unresolved trauma, those contractions can persist indefinitely, even when no threat is present. Over time, this manifests as chronic neck pain, lower back tension, jaw tightness or headaches, symptoms often mistaken for purely physical issues. Breathing patterns are another key site of trauma storage. In a calm state, breathing is deep, rhythmic, and centered in the diaphragm. In trauma, breathing becomes shallow, rapid, or even held, a reflexive attempt to minimize detection or emotional overwhelm. These dysfunctional patterns reinforce anxiety and block the body's ability to return to a state of rest. Posture, too, often reveals the residue of trauma. The shoulders may round protectively, the spine collapses inward, the eyes scan constantly. This isn't laziness or poor body mechanics, it's a posture of defense that the body has normalized for survival. Trauma doesn't only move from the brain to the body. The feedback loop goes both ways. When the body remains stuck in patterns of contraction, shutdown, or threat perception, it sends constant signals to the brain that the danger is still present. This explains why trauma survivors can experience panic attacks, emotional flashbacks, or physical pain without any conscious memory of the event that caused it. The implicit memory system, the part of the brain that holds sensory emotional memory, doesn't rely on narrative or logic. It responds to cues in the environment and within the body, reactivating survival responses based on stored somatic patterns. These physiological reminders, a tight chest, a clenched stomach, a shallow breath, become trauma's echo chamber. Even after years have passed, the body may still react as if the danger is right here, right now. Few names are more synonymous with the modern understanding of trauma and the body than Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, a Dutch-born psychiatrist and researcher. Van der Kolk has spent over 4 decades exploring how trauma shapes not just the mind, but the entire human system, especially the brain, nervous system, and body. His landmark book, The Body Keeps the Score, became a foundational text for clinicians, trauma survivors, and educators alike. It bridges neuroscience, clinical practice, and personal narratives to show a compelling truth. Trauma is not simply remembered, it is relived in the body. Van der Kolk's research emphasizes that trauma is not stored as a coherent narrative. Instead, it is stored as fragments in sensory impressions, emotions, and physiological reactions. When trauma occurs, especially in childhood, the brain's ability to encode and contextualize the experience is compromised. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought and language, is overridden by more primitive brain structures like the amygdala and brainstem, which prioritize survival. This is why trauma survivors often struggle to talk it out. The trauma is not always verbal. It may exist as a gut feeling, a flash of panic, or a sudden numbness with no obvious trigger. Van der Kolk's research shows that traditional talk therapy, while valuable, often fails to reach the body where trauma truly lives. He explains that trauma is not the story of something that happened back then. It's the current imprint of that pain on mind, body, and soul. This concept reframes how we approach healing. Rather than focusing solely on what happened, we must ask, what is your body still carrying? Van der Kolk's work helped catalyze a shift in trauma treatment, away from purely cognitive approaches and toward body-based therapies that engage the nervous system directly. And some of these modalities include somatic experiencing. Developed by Peter Levine, somatic experiencing helps individuals release trauma by working with bodily sensations rather than retelling the trauma narrative. Sensorimotor psychotherapy, which combines talk therapy with physical awareness to address trauma stored in the body. EMDR, or high movement desensitization and reprocessing, which uses bilateral stimulation to help the brain reprocess traumatic memories. Trauma-informed yoga and breathwork, which allows individuals to gently reconnect with their bodies in a safe, controlled environment. These approaches validate the lived reality of trauma survivors, that the body must be part of the healing process, not simply the container of the problem. Understanding that trauma is stored in the body is more than a scientific revelation. It's a paradigm shift that changes how we see ourselves, our behaviors, and the people around us. For decades, trauma survivors were told to move on, stop overreacting, or let it go. But when trauma is embedded in the nervous system, healing is not a matter of willpower or logic. It's a matter of regulation, learning to bring the body back to safety over and over again. This matters because many survivors carry deep shame about their responses to seemingly benign situations. They may freeze during an argument, flinch at a sudden noise, or feel completely numb when others expect them to cry. Without an understanding of how trauma works, these reactions are often misinterpreted by others and by the survivors themselves as irrational, dramatic, or emotionally unstable. In reality, these are not choices. They are expressions of a nervous system that has been sensitized to threat. Recognizing the somatic nature of trauma allows for more compassionate and effective care, not just in therapy but in schools, hospitals, families, and communities. It reminds us that people are not their behaviors. They are shaped by what their bodies have learned to do in order to survive. Moreover, this understanding opens the door to healing in places previously overlooked. Trauma survivors don't always need to talk more. They need to feel safe enough to exist in their own bodies again. And that kind of healing starts with validation, awareness, and a willingness to reconnect with the physical self. This matters because trauma is not rare. It is common and yet too often misunderstood. If we fail to recognize how deeply trauma lives in the body, we risk leaving survivors stuck in patterns they cannot escape through thought alone. Healing from trauma begins not with action, but with awareness. The quiet recognition that what you're feeling is not weakness and not madness. It is the imprint of survival. If anything in this episode resonated with you, if you've ever wondered why your body responds in ways your mind cannot explain, know this: you're not broken. Your body is not betraying you. It is doing what it learned to do to keep you alive. The good news is that what the body learned for survival, it can also unlearn for healing. But it must start with a shift in how we view trauma, not simply as a disorder of the mind, but as a whole body experience that demands a whole body approach to recovery. Your racing heart, shallow breath, muscle tension, and fatigue, these are not random symptoms. They are communications from a body that remembers. And by learning to listen, to regulate, and to reconnect, it is possible not only to cope, but to truly heal. In the next episode, we'll talk about what happens when the body doesn't fight or flee, but instead freezes, fawns, or goes numb. These lesser-known trauma responses explain how many survivors feel stuck, compliant, or emotionally distant, even when they want to feel safe and present. Until then, remember, your body is not the enemy. It is the map, and every scar it holds is a place you can begin again.